right, good evening. I'm going to call this meeting back to order. This is the meeting of August 10th, 2015. Welcome, and please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to start this evening with 3 sets of minutes, and we'll start with the first set from June 22nd, 2015. There were some changes, but those changes were sent to council, and the corrected set is now online. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Which,
June 22nd.
yeah, June 22nd, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Butler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes passed.
Testing,
Next
testing.
is the special meeting from June 29th. I believe Mr. Miller was absent, but is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I'd like to make a correction. I didn't get a chance to send to Linda. Under the taxi ordinance, I think, could you please add, nor can we regulate the taxi stand at the train station as it is on private property? The question, suggestion was made about putting the ordinancing, or moving the taxi stand, and I think we want to make clear that we cannot do that because it's on private property.
Okay.
So I'll move it with that change.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, moved by Ms. Butler with the amendment and seconded by Mr. Simon. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That set of minutes pass. And the last set of minutes, I believe Ms. Krummeler was not at that meeting, July 13th, 2015. Is there a motion to introduce? A motion to approve?
So moved.
I have one, can I make a quick correction to that one, too? I think under Ed Schneer's comments, he said 11 municipalities have applied for, maybe he's talking about the declaratory judgment, I think. But I think we want to say that it's not just 11 municipalities in New Jersey, it's 11 out of the 13 in our region, is that it?
In Mercer.
In Mercer County, right? Is that what he meant, I think? So it's 11 out of 13.
I'll make that clarification.
Would you like to move with that change?
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
and so moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Mr. Simon. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that set of minutes passes also. Next, we come to the section of our meeting for comments from the public for any item that is not already on the agenda, and I'd like to open up the meeting for public comment. Seeing no one, I'll close public comment, and we'll move on to reports. Ms. Howard, we'll start with you.
Thank you. And I see our health officer is in the audience. I wanted to report to everyone that the health department just successfully completed the tobacco age of sale enforcement, which is when they sent high school students undercover into merchants to try and buy cigarettes or e-cigarettes. And all 16 merchants in town were compliant. We had 100% compliance, which is pretty amazing. It's amazing on 2 levels. One, the statewide average for compliance is 88%, but the last time we did this in 2010, our compliance rate was 45%. So we don't have the best record, but it's also amazing because we've obviously changed the rules fairly recently up to 21 for the tobacco age of sale, and they were compliant with the new rules. So kudos to our inspectors and to those high school kids whose parents all signed waivers and allowed them to go in and try to purchase. So an interesting experience for them. And good news for us. From the Human Services perspective, just want to report this is the last week if people want to make donations to the book bag drive. They have over 100 applications for book bags, so just a reminder about the needs in our community, and the deadline is Friday. I do want to thank Christine's Hope for Kids, which is a Hopewell organization, and they donated 50 stuffed bags. Also want to note that apparently this has been another great year with the Summer Youth Program, and I would look to staff, hopefully can reiterate that, but there were 37 students who participated in the Summer Youth Employment Program, and they've had a really productive summer, and they're going to the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab this week, so they're doing some really interesting things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cronin. Mr. Miller?
A couple of brief reports. First, on the Shade Tree Commission. At its meeting on the 28th of August, the Shade Tree Commission talked about the loss of our shade tree canopy as a result of the increased number of house tear-downs, where, as we've all seen, smaller houses are being replaced by larger houses with the loss of mature trees, and the fact that we're facing 2 tree diseases that will take a toll on the oak and ash trees in the community. And the Commission voted to establish a subcommittee to review our existing shade tree ordinance, and the review is going to look at how that ordinance might be strengthened to improve the replacement of our tree canopy when we lose mature trees because of construction or to disease, and work to support our designation as a tree city. Second is the Animal Control Committee. The Animal Control Committee met on the 31st of July to review historical data on deer vehicle collisions, the annual deer population control program that's conducted by White Buffalo under contract to us, and the recreational bow hunting program that's been required by the state as a precondition for permitting our deer population control program. The review pointed out that the 3-week professional hunt that was conducted in 2014 was successful in removing approximately 250 deer from the herd. But even with that, the population density per square mile remains nearly twice the target that was adopted by the municipality many years ago. Accordingly, the Commission voted to recommend that the municipality fund a 3-week program again this winter, and that White Buffalo be funded also to perform a population estimate as a part of their contract. And upon approval of the 3-week program by council, our municipal attorney will request state approval of the program. Our animal control officer also pointed out that there appears to be a disconnect between the number of dog licenses recorded in the clerk's office and the number that the animal control officer would expect for the population of Princeton. In other words, using demographic data. There are 957 licensed dogs, while the demographic data indicates that the number probably ought to be closer to 3,000. This is an indication that there may be a large number of unlicensed dogs that might also not be inoculated for rabies. And this is something that our animal control officer is going to do some research on and report back to the Animal Control Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask Bernie a couple questions? Well, one is a comment. At HPC this afternoon, we decided we are going to invite our new arborist to HPC to discuss the very topic that you all are discussing as well, about the loss of mature trees, particularly in new development, and in the case of HPC, it's within the historic district. But are we expecting White Buffalo then in this winter to do a more aggressive culling, or are we just getting a sort of a status update from them?
The recommendation of the Animal Control Committee is that we bring White Buffalo in to do the kind of program that they undertook last year, which was a 3-week program. And in the 3-week program, they reduced the herd by 250. In previous years, we've had them in for a 2-week program, and the number has been half or less than half of that number.
Okay. Thank you.
Just briefly, Corner House will be having their retreat, their leadership retreat this week at the university, and I believe the mayor and myself will be there on Wednesday, and I believe the young man's name was Tyler Clemente, the young man that, the Rutgers person that committed suicide. Well, his family is going to come and talk with us on Wednesday morning in regard to the struggle that he went through. So we're looking forward for the Corner House leadership members to hear what they have to say. That's about it. Thank you.
Ms. Butler.
Yes, so I actually have a lot to report. I just came from the HPC meeting this afternoon. They're going to be bringing a package of amendments that are necessary and have been recommended in their approval to be a CLG, Certified Local Government. And we're hoping that package will be, by September 15th, we'll have that package. So if we can get a spot on the agenda, that would be great. I mentioned that we're inviting the arborist to the next meeting.
Chair, what is CLG about? What is that?
To be a certified local government, it's a certification given by the state, and it allows you to get grants. It also means that the state is required to notify you about historic issues in your municipality. If you don't have that designation, they've been very cooperative and have done it, but it's a really important designation in terms of historic preservation. And we've applied, and they've sent us a list of concerns that they have about our ordinance, and that might need some clarification. So they're kind of tweaking for the most part, I would say. With regard to the pool, my pool notes, the good news is the Bluefish swim and the dive team won the PASDA championships, and we will be hosting the swim and dive championships in 2016. So that's the first time probably in 30 years that we've hosted the swim championships, so that's congratulations to the Bluefish. The CP pool membership is about 5,100, 5,200, which is about on average with the last 3 summers. We've had over 90,000 visitors, and we still have, 3 or 4 weeks remaining. The last day of the pool season will be Labor Day, September 7th. So we will have had a 100-day pool season, which is about as long as it can possibly be. This is the last week for teen travel camp and the day camp. We have approximately 190 campers for 38 days, which is over 7,000 camper days, if you will, with 35 staffers. So that's over 1,300 staff days. That's a lot. This is the final week for the skateboard camp. We've had our basketball camp, track camp, and I think that's about it for the pool. We've got 2 new water fountains installed. Both have 2 arms at the adult and kid level, and they both have the bottle filling station. We reconnected the one existing fountain that's in the park. All of these projects cost us about $20,000, if you can believe it or not. And PTP, our tennis partnership arm, paid for about 3/4 of that. They also paid about $6,000 for court resurfacing earlier this spring. We had a family golf outing. We had 65 golfers, and everybody knows about Community Night Out. We have the Kids Aquathon is scheduled for August 23rd. I have another item. This in our mailboxes was the piece from Loretta Weinberg about Oprah, and I wonder whether we would want to do something about this to meet. I know from a legal committee standpoint, Oprah's been an ongoing concern, and I feel like we need to take a look at this legislation and figure out both what will result in improved governance, but also what will run up our Oprah costs. And so I don't know if somebody has any ideas about what we can do.
I'm glad you brought that up. I did ask the clerk's office to contact the league, and they've already started with some, a large document of research on the bill and some of their concerns. And I think that was electronic. I got a printout, but I think it might be electronic, and certainly we can get that to everybody on council. And I was hoping we could have some sort of resolution at the next meeting. If the legal committee has time to take the lead on it and wants to review that material and put together a resolution, that would be helpful. I know there are concerns. Certainly it would significantly impact the clerk's office, and some of the suggestions in there honestly might be good ones, but I think that some of them are well-intentioned, but the
burden will be great.
Exactly.
Mayor, I'm very familiar with both bills, the one dealing with the Sunshine Law and the one dealing with Oprah, so I'd be happy to work with the legal committee on that.
Great.
Okay, great, that would be terrific.
And the last thing I was going to report is that I attended two meetings, two Princeton University meetings, one on the Butler Tract. Lee Solo, who was here earlier, is gone. He was there. Jack West was there. I think I sent an email about that. It was a well-attended meeting, and there were a lot of interested neighbors, so I wouldn't be surprised if going forward we continue to hear from neighbors regarding that project. And I also went to the Lakeside apartment opening, which was very nice. And did you get to tour the apartments, Bob? It was really nice, and having just had a child graduate from grad school and another child going, I thought I would have been really happy to have my kids in that type of housing. It is called Lakeside, just for everyone's...
Never too late, Joe, never too late.
Never too late, let's do it. Lakeside, and to get there, you turn off Lakeside, but some of the streets within that complex are named Hibben McGee, so if you see someone walking around with a map, you'll know. And that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Simon?
That last report was interesting. I lived in the predecessor building 25 plus years ago, so. A brief report on Public Works. The Public Works Committee met last week and discussed a few items of public interest. One is we've heard from residents that there are some gaps in our schedule on brush pickup that are problematic, especially for areas in the within the former borough. And we had asked staff to take a look at what we could do within the constraints of our budget and staffing. And Bob, you've proposed, I think, 3 new pickups for the schedule for next year. Is that right?
Yes, for the schedule for next year, what we're looking at doing is in the month of July, which is when we had a lot of complaints, a lot of material put out, and spent a lot of man hours running around issuing notices. The thought is that we would add, and the way the year works out and the scheduling, we'll be done with our last round of brush pickup in about mid-June. So if we go early July, it'll be about 3 weeks later, and then again, the last week of July, 3 weeks after that, and then another 3 weeks before we start again, we can add in 2 municipal-wide, as we're calling them, brush collections, in which we would do an entire sweep of the municipality during that early week in July, late week in July, and be able to pick up a lot of the stuff that unfortunately has been unsightly all summer, and we've been chasing around and putting notices on. One of the things in talking with the staff that we're going to do with this, as well as some other things throughout the year, and we're also looking at an additional collection of brush in November. Another time when we get some of the complaints about going from early October until we would pick up brush during the Christmas tree season, when we would pick them up in January, is adding another collection there. But what we're going to look to do is, instead of doing that by sections, as we typically do with all the others, during that week, that municipal sweep, it's out by 7 o'clock Monday morning, and then our crews will work, and we may put out, depending on the week, vacations, other events, we may put out 1 crew, 2 crews, 3 crews, whatever it takes, and sweep the municipality of all the materials. So we could start with 3 crews, 1 in one section, 1 in another, 1 in a third section, and just sweep through and get everything done, instead of having a rotation of when the material's put out. We looked at what we would have done this year, knowing the volume that was out, some of the sections that were worse than others, some of the areas, and we think this will address the problem and the concern and the complaint that we've had regarding the summer, and then also regarding the fall season when we don't pick up brush from early October until January. So we think that will be a significant benefit. The week that we would do the additional brush collection in November is the week before Thanksgiving. So typically those 3 days, the 3 days of Thanksgiving week, we don't schedule anything. So if between leaves and brush we're behind or don't get through everything in that 1 week, we still have 3 more days before Thanksgiving, sort of as a fallback with nothing planned in which to continue to pick up. The other thing that we're looking at doing is in January, when we do add brush pickup, and the suggestion at the meeting was to include that in our schedule, which we will do, but I think what we're aiming at right now is the first week, that week of the 4th, we probably will list it out as sections, but based on the last 2 years, the next 3 weeks, there's really no reason to say on Monday it's this section, on Tuesday it's this section, because the volume of trees that come out during that time period is not that great. We send a crew out and sweep through the area, and then it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and what are they going to do? By that time, by the time they get back, switch up equipment, so there's no reason they can't go right into the next section. So what we're thinking is those 3 weeks, trees and brush out by 7 a.m. Monday, we sweep through and get everything done. Plus, in those weeks, sometimes we get storms. So we're sitting there going, okay, well, we can't go back into Section 4 because we told people that we weren't going to come there till Thursday, but it's going to snow on Thursday. Well, we don't want to have that problem. If the trees are out that week, we want to go pick them up, and quite honestly, most of the stuff is out on Saturday or Sunday anyway during January. People are home, they put the stuff out, and whether it's for Monday or Friday, the tree is out, usually on Saturday or Sunday. So our idea is just to be able to go in and sweep through and get everything done. It'll make us more efficient, and it'll clean things up a lot quicker. So that's what we were looking at for 2016. And the other thing for 2015, we've taken a look at our schedule, and what we are going to work into it and do as, again, a sweep is, I believe it is the week of November 16th, the week again before Thanksgiving. We are collecting leaves then, but we are also going to put out a crew to do brush. Ends up, just like we will do in 16, we're going to try it this year in 15, the same thing, have brush out by 7 o'clock Monday morning. We'll put a crew, and that crew will work through the municipality, whatever section it is, picking up brush and collecting it. And again, the following week is Thanksgiving week. When we have the 3 days where nothing is scheduled, it gives us a buffer. So in theory, we have 8 working days in which, if we don't have to do a Saturday, which allow us to do the section that has the leaves scheduled, plus collect brush. And we've talked to staff, figured it out, and we are confident that that's something we can do, and will work, and will make it'll make Princeton look a lot better than all the stuff that's, let's face it, there's a lot of stuff that's out, and people know that brush collection started today, and it really doesn't matter what section they're in. They know, a lot of people knew that August 10th was the start of it, and we have brush everywhere again. So it was a busy weekend in Princeton.
Is the revised schedule written down somewhere? Because I feel like if I were quizzed on what you just said,
The 2016 schedule, we talked about at Public Works last Monday. We're going to be putting it together, and just like in the past, it'll come to you in a printed format, probably we talked about doing it at the next meeting, the 24th, in which you'd have to adopt it and do a resolution, so that when we do go and issue notices, we can say that council had adopted. So it will be all printed out, and you will get it for the next meeting.
But you also said there were going to be some additions to the 2015 schedule?
Well, the additional for this November, we will do that with robocall and posting it on the website as we get closer to that week.
Okay.
And everything could go away if we get a storm. I mean, the whole schedule changes. If we get another significant event like we've unfortunately had the past couple falls, I mean, then it's all hands on deck and lots of robocalls, and who knows what the schedule will be.
Ms. Butler?
I feel like we almost need to take an ad in the paper. The word is just not getting out, or maybe we need to write letters to the editor or do something, because people would have to actively go to our website and see that. I feel like we need to do something that is outreach, and I know everybody's at home tonight watching this on television, but still, they might not have had their pencil handy when we made this announcement, and that was a little bit hard to follow. And so I would think we really need to think about
For the
what we can do.
November, we will get we'll look into that and see if we can do something. Maybe we'll work with the press and see if we can get something in the paper, an article. We will obviously post it on the website. We have the Facebook and everything else that we'll get it out on, and we will do the robocalls. And one of the problems with the calls that we're finding more and more of is that unless people have registered their cell phones with us, unfortunately, more and more people don't have
listen to their home
landlines.
phone. Oh.
You know, we get a lot of phone calls that we send out, this number is no longer valid, and that's because they no longer have phone service. So, you know, if there's a pitch, the pitch is for people through the website to register their cell phones to get these messages also. So that can be part of what we're looking to do.
I understand the problem you've described about having a zone, and then you finish that zone, but you can't really start in the next zone until you've said you'll come to that zone because you don't want to miss stuff. But given that you're saying that now crews can really kind of breeze through the town a little more quickly, I wonder if it wouldn't make, do they have time to go get started picking up some of the piles that are around?
We've discussed that. And the problem is, the issue is we do that, and we get the opposite. We start getting the phone calls. You said you weren't coming on our street till next week. Why are you already on?
Well, you will be on their street next week, though. I mean, but you're just picking up the stuff that's already out there.
We just, you want to address
Yeah,
that?
where I think the committee left this is that we'll leave up to staff's judgment to sort of make the call as to, you know, what they think is the most efficient. We're trying to do this in a way that provides the highest level of service at the lowest possible cost to do so. So it's, and that's why, for example, we're getting rid of the by day zone.
For some of our events.
For some of them, because they feel like that for those periods, the total collection will be smaller and they can make it through and then have time at the end of the week to do other stuff.
Right, I understand that, but I also thought you could just get started on some of the other districts. But that's, you know, because there is so much residual stuff.
Truth of it is, on main roads, we do start early.
All right, and then there was...
Did have that debate.
If we know,
yeah.
you know, 206 or the major cross streets, both east and west or north and south, and we get somewhere and we've got time, we do pick it up, mainly because the police are calling and saying, can you clean up Valley? There's big piles out there. Or can you go to Witherspoon? And we do that, but most of it is at the direction with the, consulting with the police.
Right, so, and then just in terms of another follow-up from Public Works, as you'll recall, late last year, we had a presentation by Stephen Hiltner on a proposal for roll carts for leaf pickup or leaf and brush pickup. And we discussed the possibility of a low-cost pilot in the Public Works Committee and asked staff to work on a plan for that. This is not a commitment at this point. This is a plan to see if we can make it work. It would be geographically constrained. We'd have a limited number of voluntary participation households, and we'd keep the cost, I think, under $10,000, where we said we could keep it with all in for the pilot and just see how it works so that we could assess it and see whether residents are satisfied with the service and whether it offers a significant improvement over the bagged. Whether containers are just more convenient for people to work with than bags. We can't mix leaf and brush, which is would be, I think, what most people would like to have happen, but the facility just simply can't take it. So what would go in the carts in this pilot would be the same thing that can go in the leaf bags now.
But I'll be honest, one of our concerns with the carts, because we see it in the bags, is people putting dirt in the carts, people putting garbage in some of the bags, and they may see the carts, think garbage, not necessarily think that it's, leaves and stuff. So there are some concerns, some things we would have to look at, but unfortunately you'd be surprised what we get surprised with in the leaf bags.
Right, and we're setting this up as a pilot to be evaluated, not as a rubber stamp to go forward. This is really to assess whether it's working and can work. The last thing I'll simply mention briefly is with respect to the leaves. We did discuss whether the municipality is in compliance with it, and you said on Public Works sites where on public lands where we're able to do so, Public Works is already mowing in the leaves that they're able to do so and or leaving them where they're able to do so. I'll report that back to the Environmental Commission, so just so people are aware of that. And that's just speaking for what's in the purview of Public Works, not any other municipal department. and not in terms of any sort of, residential program.
But there are times, remember, Patrick, that it reaches the point that if all the leaves have come down, we have to clean some of the leaves up on some of the municipal properties.
That's right,
When
and-
we can mulch them back in, we do that. But when it gets to the volume that it's too much, which happens on occasion at Monument Hall, we do have to pick them up.
And that's what I'll report back, is that we're already complying with that as municipal policy to the extent that we are able to do so.
Right, and I would say that is true of the properties rec maintains as well, with the exception of the playing fields, which they cannot leave the leaves on. It wouldn't, it would destroy the playing fields. And some of the smaller pocket parks, where the amount of leaves would just overwhelm the park and make for slippery walkways, et cetera. But
Right,
in
well, I'll
larger
report
open
that back.
areas, we're already really complying with that.
Okay, great. I just have two quick reports. One is really more of Ms. Krummel's report than mine, so I want to give her the credit, because I know this has been an issue she's been pushing for a long time, but the planning board meetings are going to start to be televised starting September 17th. So tune in. It's a good show sometimes. And I also wanted to express my thanks to the Recreation Department, the Police Department, all of the departments and staff who were at Community Night Out. I'm sure I speak for all of council. It was a really great event, and just reminds me how lucky we are to live in Princeton. And nobody asked me to Zumba this time, which I was also thankful for. It's a great event.
I saw you duck out right before the Zumba started.
All right, and are there any staff reports this evening, Mr. Kaiser?
Thank you very much, Mayor. I put a few items to report on. The Mount Lucas Road Improvement Project is proceeding. The New Jersey American Water Company is coming the final days of getting their work finished. They've been working down toward Cherry Hill Road. They anticipate to be finished early next week. And once they're done, then Top Line can get in, and we're looking to have them substantially complete the job by Labor Day. Also, the Prospect Avenue work is proceeding. S. Brothers is involved in that job, and that's moving along. Deanna has scheduled the Edge Hill neighborhood meeting for September 9th, which, Mayor, I believe you'll be chairing here in this room. And Transco's made some good progress as well. They have completed the restoration of Ridgeview Road, where they had disturbed it, and they're working today on White Oak Drive, Bouvant Drive, and Stewart Road, and they intend to have that work finished by the end of this week. And the preliminary easement restoration work has been done. There'll be more work done after Labor Day, as well as the planting of the riparian vegetation that they're required to install.
Thank you. Are there any other staff reports?
Just one, Mayor.
Mr. Shea.
One, I'd like to thank the police department for the work they're doing in the tour bus enforcement. Just to give council an update, they've issued over 48 summonses to bus operators for such things as stopping in the no stopping zone, loading zones, blocking crosswalks. We've also issued 144 warnings for various infractions and sent over 30 notices to tour providers throughout town, and we'll continue to do vigorous enforcement of the regulations for the tour buses.
I had a follow-up question for that. I just received an email earlier today from a resident who lives not on Nassau Street, but in one of the neighborhoods close, and she was saying, there's tour buses who come through her neighborhood and park on those streets, and I just want to make sure that council knows the message we should be giving to residents, and I assume it's to call the non-emergency police line number or take a picture of the license plate if it's after hours. Is that the right message?
During the day, they can either call Access Princeton, or they can call after hours the non-emergency number and report it, and an officer will go out to investigate.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Mayor, excuse me, one other thing I forgot to mention, and that is the Washington Road, Nassau Street intersection. Deanna's been working with DOT regarding the traffic signal installation there. They plan to start later this month, and they'll be working approximately a 2-week period with nighttime work to get the necessary conduits in and the foundations in at that particular location, and they're looking to have the entire installation done within a 2-month period. But the initial portions of the work will be done at nighttime, where they have to do the trenching and the work to install the foundations.
Could I just bring up an issue about the related crosswalk over on Alexander? We have a real, Nick Sutter's not hiding down here, is he now? We have a real issue with people crossing from the canoeing right into Turning Basin, which is about 20 feet away from the actual crosswalk. And so people will or won't stop for the people who are just crossing illegally, and then you think that they're gone and you speed up and now you've got the people in the crosswalk. It's really getting very dangerous down there and getting seemingly more dangerous.
And good news in that regard. Council had awarded the contract for the rapid flashing beacons at that location because the old in-pavement lights ceased to work, and those stanchions for the beacons were actually scheduled to be installed today, and we're looking for the light to be activated within the next 10 days to 2 weeks.
We need to get some sort of signage at the canoe place to make people go down and cross in the crosswalk, though, too, and maybe something in Turning Basin Park, because they just cross right over there. So dangerous.
We'll discuss that at the next Traffic Safety Committee meeting.
Bob, are those beacons that you mentioned, are they going to be voice activated like the ones at McCarter that tells you this?
The rapid flashing beacons that will be installed at that location will be push button activated.
Okay.
They're not motion detector activated, but push button activated. Okay. And they're really very, very effective.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more reports? And if not, we'll move on to our presentation for this evening. Thank you for your patience. And I'd like to invite up Carol Norris from the University Medical Center of Princeton at Plainsboro.
Yes.
And this was she's here to speak about a project that we've been working on for quite a few months, and I want to thank Jeff Gross, our health officer, who's here, and also Elisa Niera from Department of Human Services, who couldn't be with us tonight. But when we found out that New Jersey Transit was planning to cut the 655 line to the hospital, raised serious concerns. The hospital has been a really terrific partner in trying to figure out a solution to this, and I'll turn it over to you to talk about what you've come up with.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm here to tell you that I believe so. Okay. Is this better? Or? Yeah. Okay. Is that better? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to tell you about.
You should get really close because people listen on TV.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. All right. I'm here to tell you about the new transportation program that we have developed along with others, and we do appreciate their help in doing that. First of all, Princeton Healthcare System is committed to ensuring that patients have access to the care that they need. Back during the Certificate of Need process for the new hospital, we made a commitment to provide access for the patients who live near the former hospital site and who had no other means of transportation to getting to the new hospital. So together with Princeton University, New Jersey Transit, the Greater Mercer Transportation Management Association, and other organizations, we came together to support the 655 bus, which was a new bus line that went from Princeton, Plainsboro, and back. And due to low ridership and possibly other reasons, New Jersey Transit is discontinuing that bus line. For the last 3 years, though, we have supported it at a level of $65,000 a year, and in fact, we have provided around $225,000 of support for the bus and for other transportation programs, including Ride, Provide, and Crosstown. So when we learned, as the mayor said, that the bus was going to be discontinued, we began looking with others for other options. It's going to be discontinued on September 1st, so on August 24th, we are starting a new on-demand taxi service where patients will be able to call access a bilingual staff member who will help to arrange door-to-door transportation, a taxi service for the patients, as I mentioned, who live half a mile or less from the old hospital site and who have no other means of transportation. This service will be available Mondays through Fridays. The first pickup will be 7:30 a.m., the last pickup will be 6 p.m., and it will also be available on 2 Saturdays a month when the clinic is open. They're open on alternating Saturdays, so we will make that available then as well. As I said, the service is free to the patients, and we will begin offering this on August 24th.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Goodman? No, go ahead.
No, okay. Is there, with the service, first of all, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. I participated as paraprofessionals in a couple of those studies in regard to finding out if transportation is much of a need in the community. You mentioned patients and clients and so forth. Are they going to be asking for identification or something, or how would they determine if a person's a patient or just someone calling for a taxi ride to the hospital?
Well, they are going to be calling the clinic at the hospital. They will reach clinic staff. The staff members there are bilingual, and we took that as a priority. They will be asked a series of questions, their name, their address, the time of pickup and things like that, and they will be able to determine from the address whether they live in the geographic area that we're looking at, and they will also be asked, do you have an appointment, where do you have an appointment, that kind of thing. So we will be able to determine if...
Okay, is it just the clinic patients?
No, it's
Anyone that has
anybody who needs to come to the hospital,
Excellent.
the clinic, the medical arts pavilion.
Thank you.
It might be helpful if you could give us a rough idea of the geographic area that you're talking about in that half-mile radius around the old hospital site.
Okay. On one end, it would be Nassau Street. On the other side, it goes up to 206, and then down to Valley Road, and then over to the high school.
Ms. Howard?
So, Carol, thank you. This is great, and I want to thank the mayor and especially Jeff and Elisa for all the work they did to pull this together. But I do want to clarify on that point of, you said if they'll be asked if there's an appointment, somebody could be going to visit, say, a relative in the hospital, right? I mean, they just have to have a valid reason for going to the campus.
This is really about access to care for patients. So it really is, it is for patients.
It's not to visit a relative, because I think we had talked at the Board of Health about it being potentially that it could be to visit.
Yeah.
One of the items that came up was if you were traveling, say, with a significant other to the medical arts pavilion for treatment, maybe for support, or if an expecting wife, something like that, you would be able to accompany them via the taxi service. But it's something along the lines of, we want to promote that it's access to care, not just a means to get over there. Obviously, now the campus is offering many things, nice gift shops, cafeterias, things like that, so they don't want to push it for the wrong reasons. And I think initial communication, getting that across is important.
Well, that was my second question, is really, some of the, as with all of these things, if people don't know about them, then, and they're not taking advantage, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Sometimes they fail. What are the best ways? How do you plan to get the word out, and how can we work with you on that?
I'll take that. So that's where Health and Human Services are going to partner. A lot of the outreach, as we noticed with our survey, we did an initial transportation survey, needs survey, prior to this decision to find out exactly what people knew of the prior 655 line and the voucher system. And what we found out was nearly 80% of the individuals surveyed, we surveyed over 53 households, did not know about the voucher system. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. We want to make sure people see this as a norm, and this is a household thing. People know they can get over to the hospital via the service, and the best way to do so is by kind of boots on the ground. So we're actually going to partner with Princeton University, the community action team, with some of the students, some of the incoming freshmen, to flyer the entire neighborhood and make sure everybody knows about it, and then also run surveys after the fact to make sure people are cognizant of it. The one thing the hospital is going to partner with us on is printing all the materials, so they'll assist with us on that, but in terms of the people power, we're going to look to Princeton University to also assist with getting the word out.
Terrific. And just on that access, oh, yes?
To follow up on that, we will also have the flyers in English and Spanish for our patients and make them available at the
At the
hospital.
clinic, terrific. Just on that access to care question, I think I would encourage you to take a broad view of what that means, access to care. I mean, the evidence really shows that having a family member participate in your treatment and knowing your care providers. So I would hate to hear about a family member not being able to visit somebody when they're having a physical therapy appointment or something, when they can be part of that care. And so I would consider that as part of the care and hope that you will too.
Okay. Yes, we'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there more questions? And then I wanted to have Jeff Grosser talk about the second piece of this. The on-demand taxi service is obviously a really great service for those who live within the geographic area it's serving. But when we are looking at the loss of the 655, there's everybody else who's not in that area, and there's the university really stepped up to help with that. So
Yeah, so as Carol mentioned, there's obviously the bus line goes as far south as Nassau Street, but there's a significant population of Princeton, not only those that live here, but also those that commute to here and then commute to the University Medical Center to work. So to bridge that gap, we spoke with the university, at Princeton University, and they're also going to extend Tiger Transit and specifically their Plainsboro line to provide service Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Via their Tiger Transit line. So that will hopefully bridge the gap from transportation in that capacity.
and they're adding a stop at Palmer Square.
Palmer Square.
Which they didn't have before. And one of the advantages of that line, even better than the 655, is that it's also free, like the taxi service. Ms. Grimmer?
Well, I think for that to work, we need signs. I've been asking for this, signs at the bus stops that tell people that the public is welcome to get on those university buses, because it's really, it's intimidating for some people to get on that bus because they don't, it says Princeton University, and we might say it in meetings, it might say it in letters that they're allowed to be on it, but I don't think it's going to work if we don't put some actual signs
And
up.
another thing through our survey, we realized that people weren't aware that the Tiger Transit was free for anyone. So that's another thing that we need to advertise so people understand they can also take that if they don't live within that geographic area.
Yeah, I mean, but don't you think that's the best way, a sign at the place where the bus stops? Because that will give you the confidence to actually get on. If it says right at the stop, the public is welcome to get on this. I just don't feel like it's actually going to work unless we do that.
I think that's going to be part of the advertising, not only with this line, but with that as well, just getting the word out there. And another thing that we noticed was that some of the clinic services or the community health center services, we're also going to promote those because they're some of the literature that's out there regarding the community health center and specifically the Well Baby Clinic, which the town funds. There are still a lot of questions about what those services provide. The municipality actually provides immunizations and sports physicals, regular well baby checkups for anybody between the ages of 6 months and 18 years that's underinsured or uninsured. And that's one of the great programs that is offered in conjunction with the hospital right now. What we noticed was when the hospital was down the street, we saw a lot of those patients come into the WIC clinic, which is right next door. So we're trying to kind of rebuild that relationship so those people that travel from here to there also come back here for WIC and all the services they provide.
Ms. Lerman?
Yeah, excuse me, Jeff, I don't know if this is for you or for Carol, but I know I worked with the hospital for years in regard to the prostate free screening clinic, where we screen people for prostate cancer and so forth. Now, would that be considered, someone can take the taxi for that? Any free screenings that the hospital has? Because that's not a appointment set up type of, do you, for the screenings, I know you have screenings throughout the year, free screenings. Can they go to the hospital for free screenings?
You know what, we can take a look at that.
Okay.
We do have a lot of free screenings
Yeah.
out in the community at a lot of different locations, not just at the hospital. We have over 1,400 events a year, kind of, as I said, spread throughout the area, so we will take a look at that.
Okay.
And make sure that we include that as part of the information that we get out there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
To follow up on Councilwoman Quinliner's point, I think, too, what I recall from the discussions when the hospital was closing and leaving, there were a lot of employees who did live in the neighborhood were also concerned, so I'm happy to hear that the bus service will start at 7, or is that the taxi service that starts at 7? The bus service starts at 7?
Yeah, Tiger Transit.
Tiger Transit, so that if the shift starts at 7:30, is that correct, that they would be able to get there in time?
Yeah, they're
Is that
picking up
timed?
I'm not sure, because I think it runs on a 55-minute
So
schedule.
we're double checking to see if it's 6:55 or 7:55.
Where does it go? 55 minutes. Anyway, well, hopefully employees who need to get there, but maybe,
The schedule still, I don't think that it's been finalized yet, so I don't know what end of that, where it starts, and if it's picking up
Right.
here and getting there at 7:30 or not, but it takes about an hour to make the loop.
oh, well, okay, so that was a concern, though, just FYI, is that there were employees of the hospital who were also having trouble getting over there. So I would hope that the hospital would educate the employees as well. That might be another opportunity to let people know that the Tiger Transit will at least get them to town.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on our agenda, we have a set of public hearings. The first one is an ordinance by Princeton concerning alarm system registrations and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Council's discussed this already at a couple meetings. If there's not any further questions from council, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. So I'm going to open it up. Are there any comments on alarm system registrations? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And is there...
One more comment before we close the discussion. I'm just going to explain my negative vote. It's the same as it was before, which is, I just think that the initial penalty of up to a $2,000 fine, 90 days in jails, and/or 90 days of community service is very excessive for a first offense on this one, so I'm going to vote against it.
So noted. Is there a motion for the, moved by Mr. Miller?
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crumiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
And Mr. Simon?
No.
Motion carries.
Motion carries 5-1, and Mr. Simon expressed his reasoning for the no vote because of the excessive penalties. Second ordinance is an ordinance by Princeton concerning alcoholic beverages and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. If there's no questions from council, I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Miller
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crumiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is an ordinance by Princeton concerning the Princeton Police Department and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Are there any questions or comments from council before I open the public hearing? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
Move it. Go ahead.
The same comment, just to explain, I'm supportive of everything about the ordinance except for, I think the appropriate authority should be an elected official or a committee, and will again vote no for that reason.
And I want to say I agree wholeheartedly with Patrick, and I felt that all along, and I think that the events of the, since we started this process of the police ordinance, have done nothing except reinforce my belief that we should be more accountable to the public with regard to the police.
I'll move it. Moved by Ms. Howard.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crumiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Simon?
No.
Motion carries.
And the ordinance passes 4-2. Next is an ordinance by Princeton concerning taxis and other vehicles for hire and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And there was a note in this ordinance, a need to amend Section 3111. I would recommend that we do that before we open the public hearing.
Yeah, do you want me to just tell you what it is?
Sure.
It's, the map, the official map is really huge, and there was no way to make it really, to make, we had to make, if we made it smaller, it would, you can't really read it, and so, very well. So we are allowing a smaller version that isn't quite as detailed. I mean, you know, it's like compressed, and it's also, I think it might be on one side, on two sides, to be allowed to be, the taxi drivers can use that as the map in their car. They can get, you know, we don't force them to have the huge map in their car, the map of the zones.
So would you like to propose that amendment?
Yes, I will propose that amendment.
Okay. And seconded by Mr. Miller. And now I'd like to open up the public hearing. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. You all, I want to commend the Ordinance Review Committee that, given this is a fairly contentious issue, we have no one here tonight. I know you talked with many people in the process of crafting this. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Well, do we need to vote to
I'll vote on the amendment first.
amendment?
Oh, maybe
I
not.
believe the motion was to adopt with the amendment.
Okay.
And it's been out there publicly what the change was.
Okay.
There was a red line version in the agenda.
Right.
And Lisa's memo outlined the change, so I think you're fine.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
And Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and the ordinance passes unanimously. And next is an ordinance pursuant to NJSA 40A 12-3, authorizing Princeton to accept the donation of Block 1502, Lot 37, Princeton Tax Map, from the Princeton Housing Authority. And this is in regards to a landlocked piece of land that's behind the Mary Moss Playground. I don't know if there's any further questions or comments from council before we open up the public hearing.
I just would like to thank the Housing Authority for their work on this project. I think it'll be a nice addition. I think it'll be a win-win for the Housing Authority to sort of get rid of that building, which had become a little bit dangerous, and will be a nice addition, I hope, to Mary Moss Park, which will also serve the residents of that neighborhood. So special thanks to the Housing Authority.
I agree.
Is there a motion to introduce? Oh, no, I'm sorry, to open up the public hearing, sorry. Opening up the public hearing for this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, and is there a motion?
Second?
It's moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. And I want to extend Ms. Butler's thanks to the Housing Authority. This is a really great addition to that project. Next, we come to our ordinance introductions. The first is an ordinance by Princeton establishing 1 hour free parking in the Spring Street Garage and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. I'd like to invite up Deanna Stockton and Bob Huff to walk us through what's involved with this ordinance.
Thank you. The ordinance amendment before you is in preparation for the new Spring Street Garage hardware. We had conversations with the library and also the parking operations staff, and it became evident that nobody wanted to I shouldn't say nobody wanted, there was a desire to rethink the validation process that's taking place for library patrons. And so the compromise situation that we've come up with is to remove the 2-hour free parking with validation by the library and replace it with a 1-hour free parking for all customers of the Spring Street Garage parking lot. And so the ordinance before you includes that provision. We would remove any fees related to the 30-minute to 1-hour section of the current ordinance. And then also in looking at how the garage is currently operated, the way the parking tickets, the lost parking tickets are adjusted for customers is the parking operations staff will actually review a time and date stamped video to determine what the time of entry is in order to calculate the value of the parking that is owed. So the ordinance before you has been updated to reflect that. We've also removed a provision about special rates for certain holidays and instead replaced that with a provision that the mayor and council by resolution can set special holiday and event rates. I'm available to take any questions. Yes.
How much work is it going to be to review that video? I mean, most garages, if you lose your ticket, you pay the max. I mean, I hate to be cruel, but on the other hand, hold on to your ticket. Don't lose it.
I think it's fairly easy for them if they have a starting point from the parking customer that they can review the video from their indications when people are more than willing to accept the one-day rate of $23 for a lost ticket. If they accept that fairly easily, then they know that the patron has probably been there for multiple days, and that's really where it kicks in, that they think, oh, now's the time to go look at the video. But from what I understand, it's not a time-consuming process once they know a starting period.
I mean, I'd hate to hire more staff to chase this down on behalf of people, and then they just lose the tickets. I'll trust you on that.
Now it's pretty quick.
Okay. My other question is about the mayor and council setting the free parking. Will we have some guidelines on that? I mean, I feel like we don't want to get pressured into giving free parking. Am I sounding too hard-hearted? I don't want to give, everybody comes along and they're going to want free parking for their event, but this is part of our revenue stream, and so are we going to create some guidelines for this?
We can discuss it at a Public Works Committee meeting and see if there are some guidelines to put in place. Some general discussion has been related to holidays, if you want to think about like a special afternoon rate or something right before the holidays to bring in more people who are shopping in town. Another idea is for the once-a-year library gala to do a special event rate as well for that, whether it be free or a reduced rate. So we can work with Public Works Committee and staff to come up with guidelines if that's what you desire.
Thank you.
I think that's a good idea, just to have something on file that's, we could even adopt it by resolution, the guidelines.
Right, and what is the history of when it's been given before, but I don't want to get in,
I think we did discuss the history, and the history was there was something in the ordinance, but in practice, the old system couldn't handle it, so there were no special rates given. That's how it worked.
I like that.
So that's the history.
The rate would become zero because the system would go.
Right.
So, but no, recently there hasn't really been anything. And as Deanna said, it's really more to look at like the holiday, or if there's a major event and you wanted to do something different, at least it gives you a mechanism now.
Well, I don't know why something like the library, they don't just, it doesn't come as part of the ticket, and, then you can get in and out of there quickly, so.
Mr. Rubman?
Yes, thank you, Deanna. I've been having quite a few, I would say, phone calls or emails or interactions at McCaffrey's and Rite Aid and everywhere else in regard to the parking situation. And I think the way that the 2-hour parking became so famous, and Council President Miller would understand, is that the township, the former township, as you know, the residents were basically offered the 2 hours of free parking for the buy-in to move the library back to the location where they are now. And I guess it's a feeling, even though we're one Princeton, it's no more Princeton Township or Princeton Borough. I guess there's a feeling that they're being, I don't know, what's a nice word to say? It's like a letdown, I would say. So I was wondering with this program, and this is something that's, I hate to throw a monkey wrench, and I'm not going to throw a monkey wrench, but is there a way that if we say 1 hour parking, that there could be a 15-minute grace period? And the reason why I ask is that after looking at the library's programming, a lot of the programming is 1 hour. And if you get there an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 5 minutes or so forth, then you have to pay the full hour rate. And I was just wondering if any consideration can be done for that. So I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not jumping all over you guys. I understand the whole, but that was something that I thought could be a compromise for so many people that are feeling that they are totally, what they were promised to just totally let go here.
Maybe I'll jump in, because we did talk about this at the Public Works meeting, and I mean, we actually felt like the hour free for everyone was giving more value to more people. So I'm just saying, I don't know.
What's the rate for the first 30 minutes? So what are we talking about?
Actually, we see that here in our agenda packet on page 156.
Thank you.
And residents come out ahead. Well, it's actually all people who park there, which is residents and non-residents combined, right? So, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. We come out ahead on this. Am I reading this right? The town will collect a little bit more revenue as a result of this change.
In a very simplistic calculation that our parking operations provided, at this point it is indicating that that we are ahead a little bit.
And that's assuming no modification of behavior on the part of the people who park, right?
Correct.
So people for whom the 2 hours free is critically important may drive a block or two farther where they find free parking.
Right. But we can definitely look at that validation, a little bit of a grace period for the extra 10 minutes, the extra 15 minutes. We can look at that and see how that can work into this recommendation.
Mr. Miller?
I'd like to express a couple of concerns about the fee structure that we've set up. First of all, with respect to the 2 hours with a validated ticket from the parking garage, that was one of the least well-kept secrets in town. But it was in town, and people who came to the parking garage from out of town were not aware of it, and in the main wound up paying for whatever time they were in the garage. In other words, they got the 30 minutes, and very few of them were probably there for 30 minutes, most of them there for longer than 30 minutes, and wound up contributing to the welfare of the community. And the 2 hours was probably used mainly, I'd say almost exclusively, by people who live in Princeton and understood that they could get the 2 hours by getting their ticket validated. I think by making the 1 hour available to everyone, we're devaluing the value of the garage to residents and making it available to anybody who comes into town from anywhere for 1 hour free parking. Quotes around the free. The other concern I have is kind of truth in advertising. Our ordinance says the first hour shall be free. but the first hour is only free if you stay there for 59 minutes and 59 seconds. And as soon as the clock ticks over into 1 second after the first hour, you wind up paying $1.25 for the first hour and $1.25 for the second hour. So it's really only free under certain circumstances, and I think we have to make that clear in the ordinance, because if you stay there for 2 hours or 3 hours, you wind up paying exactly the same amount of money for the first hour as you pay for the second hour and the third hour. So I think truth in advertising, let's make it clear.
Ms. Gilmore?
Well, I just want to register my complete disagreement with the logic that the cheaters should be rewarded. I mean, it might be like a well-kept secret or something, but I never felt that way. I felt I was cheating to do that, and I feel that people who did that were cheating. So I really, I'm sorry. I mean, I know you're not a cheater, but to tell you the truth, that was one of the reasons that I wanted to get rid of the library, the whole validation thing, because it's really not fair for people who would feel like, oh no, I don't want to cheat, and maybe they don't have very much money, but they wouldn't cheat, and then they pay, and then people who say, I'm going to go get my library ticket validated after I went to Witherspoon Grill,
Jenny, I wasn't making a judgment call on how the 2 hours was used, whether the 2 hours was used by somebody who did research in the library, or the 2 hours was used by somebody who walked through the library and came back 2 hours later and got their ticket validated. My point was that the use of the 2 hours was primarily known by people who live in Princeton. And if you came to Princeton from Philadelphia, or you came to Princeton from New York, or came to Princeton from some other community far enough away that you weren't reading the Princeton paper and understood that there was 2 hours of free parking that might be obtained, that you wound up paying, and you wound up contributing to the welfare of the community. And if everyone gets 1 hour free, then people who live outside of Princeton and people who live in Princeton are treated exactly the same way. And I'm not sure that there's an element of fairness in that.
But that doesn't make sense. It's only people, you're not supposed to use the validation unless you're in the library working at the library, right?
I'm not talking about validation. I'm talking about the fact that under the system that has been proposed, is that any user of the garage who's in the garage for 59 minutes and 59 seconds doesn't pay. And
true.
That's whether you live in Princeton or live in Morristown or live in Ramapo or live in New York State someplace. And I'm concerned that there's something about that bothers me, in that I'm not sure that we should be operating the parking garage for the benefit of people who don't live in the community.
Well, Bernie, all parking garages, when we drive to New York City, no one says, are you from New Jersey, because you're going to pay more to park here. I mean...
Right, I feel like the parking garage is a benefit to the downtown and to all the Princeton residents who are, even the ones who want to park in the meter spots. The garage is beneficial because we have more of the metered spots. So I think the parking is just a general benefit, and it also, I think, hopefully, it helps the businesses thrive who are near the parking garage, so...
I have a question for Council President Miller, if this would make him more comfortable, if there was a rate for parking there for 1 hour, and then a rate at an hour and a half, and then a rate for 2 hours to help to break up that, so you're not going to be hit right away if you're there for an hour and a half. I don't know if that would make a difference and make you feel more comfortable.
It might. I'd like to see, if you talk about parking in New York, and I think all of us have experienced this, you go into New York into a parking garage and you park for 3 hours and you wind up paying $35 or $40. And I don't think that you want to compare what we have here to parking in New York City. Parking for the first hour in New York City, they generally advertise something like $15 to park for 1 hour.
No, my point on that was not the rate, but the discrimination. I mean, we don't pay more because we're parking in a New York garage because we're from New Jersey. I mean...
But parking garages in New York City are privately operated in the main, and our garage is a parking utility, and if I'm not wrong, we're still paying down the indebtedness on that parking utility, and I think it is running us somewhere in the order of $1 million a year, if I'm not mistaken.
Ms. Howard?
Just want to add a couple more thoughts that I want to associate myself with Councilwoman Krummeller's comments about the library. And what I liked about this proposal was that moving from half an hour free to an hour, at least as I thought about it, and I think, Bernie, you've made good points, but as I thought about it, that benefits local residents who are popping downtown for short errands. If you're coming from elsewhere, hopefully you're spending more time here. But so my thinking was that would benefit local residents more, and then remove the uncertainty and some people's discomfort about the library validating and whether it was appropriate to validate when you weren't going to the library. It just was cleaner, is what I thought, and that actually would benefit local residents in the process. So that was why I was comfortable with it.
Can I interject? There's one thing, the way the rates are set up is that essentially the first 2 hours at meters and at the garage are the same cost. And then if you have longer term stays, that's where the value comes in of parking at the garage. It's set up so that it's cheaper for more than 2 hours to park at the garage. But setting up the 1 hour free, in a way, opens up the garage more to the residents in a way because they don't feel that they have to circle to do a short-term stop. At meters on street, they can pop into the garage for free and leave within that hour. Just another thought, another side of it.
I think you make a very good point, because we really should want to encourage everyone to go into the garage and leave free spaces at the meters, so people who are on even shorter term and don't mind paying will use the meters. I think that's the way that good parking is designed, and this accomplishes that perfectly, because people can, if they drift over longer, they won't get a ticket, and in fact the rate is preferable to being at a meter. So I think it's a good pricing arrangement.
So if you're parked at a meter for, say, 65 minutes, is that, it seems like parking at the garage is going to cost you more than that.
Right. The meters are set up with an 8-minute grace period. So I think you pay just the $1.25, depending on where you are, because we do have the 3 different prices depending on where you are in the town at the meters. But it's essentially, it would be free, it would be cheaper on the street in that case than if you had to pay the full hour to 2 hour difference at the garage.
It's sort of like taking a class and you're deciding whether to take it pass-fail or not. You want to get the D, not the F.
I mean, if we need to, we could look at putting in that 8-minute grace period as well at the garage to mimic the meters.
Is there anybody from the public who wanted to speak to this ordinance? Okay, now would be a good time for you to come up. And if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes, that would be great.
Briefly. Charles Palestri, 106 Shady Brook Lane, very frequent user of the library. I I commend the councilman on recalling the fact that the situation of locating the library in the borough, that part of that discussion was that there would be a certain amount of free parking for people who use the library. I agree with Councilman Miller that if the first hour free no longer is free, if you exceed the first hour, you're going to have a tremendous number of people coming and complaining at that library, because the policy now has been that you get your free period, and then the charge begins after that free time period. So the notion of back charging you, I didn't even expect that when I came here tonight. I guess I've got two main points. The first point is, what is your evidence that there are a significant number of people who use the free parking at the library and don't use the library at all? I spend a considerable amount of time in the library, and that would be evident for anyone who was there. You would see people walking in, getting their ticket punched, and then walking out. What's your evidence? And I was really concerned about that, because that, as a statement from the township, was published in the packet. I mean, you were essentially accusing a lot of your fellow citizens of gaming the system, of cheating. And do you have any real hard evidence of that kind of behavior?
I've seen my friends do it.
That's not good enough.
Well, I think we have information from the library that they've seen it, and I think also they want to be out of the validation business. They don't want to do it anymore.
As again, I spend a lot of time in the library, so I went around and asked some of the people working at the library. I said, it was reported in the paper that you no longer want to validate this. Now, they're not doing much validation now. You simply put your ticket in a puncher and walk out. But the people in the library did not say that. Now, I understand that you want to raise rates, that we've got to pay for the garage, but I really question some of the statements that were released in terms of a significant number of people cheating, library staff no longer wanting to validate tickets. I just don't find any of that to be the actual case. If you want to raise rates, if you need to change rates, you should be at least honest as to why you're changing the rates. I think anyone can understand that. My second point would be, if you have a garage that has 1 hour free, and none of the other garages have 1 hour free, and it's broadly publicized, don't you expect that the Spring Street garage to get over? I mean, if I was coming into Princeton, I'd soon learn that's the garage I want to go to. I mean, I suspect what you're going to find is just a large number of people using that garage now, and it's already usually filled. So I'm just wondering as to, whether you've thought all of the implications of this out. But certainly, if you want to raise the rates, don't make loose assumptions about a lot of people cheating at the library. Because if you go and sit there for a couple of hours and watch the movement. See if you actually see people, because it's very clear. To do that, they'd have to walk in, simply put their ticket in the meter and walk out. You don't see that. And actually, just to go back to the original reason for why there was free parking at the library, it wasn't to encourage people to use the garage. It was to encourage people to use the library. And it has been highly successful with that, highly successful with that. And locating the library in downtown Princeton, the borough, even though I live out in the township, was a very wise move. That's one of the reasons we have so many young people using that library now. So, somehow I don't think you've really thought out the whole implications of what that garage is and its purpose in the community. Last comment, if there are a lot of people cheating on the system, I would then expect the usage numbers on the library to go significantly down after you implement something like this. And therefore, there'd be less reason to spend money on the library. So it'd be interesting to see. I honestly don't think usage numbers will go down. But if you're right in your assumption, then the usage numbers for the library should go down, and it should be measurable. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this ordinance? Okay, I want to bring it back to council. Ms. Cromwell, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it's offensive to call people cheaters, and I didn't mean to imply that, but I do think, I mean, Bernie even said it was a well-kept secret that there's 2 hours of parking for... So, of course, we have no statistics and nobody knew, but everyone thought that might be the case. We did not make any assumptions about it in our calculations. But one of the main reasons was just that the library didn't want to be in the validation business anymore. The library didn't like it. So that's one of the reasons we did it. And it also, I think it just seems cleaner, like Heather said. This seems like a simpler, cleaner system. I also was curious, I think that our parking garage is already cheaper than the other parking garages in town. Do you know? But I don't know that for a fact, but it seems like it based on from when I've been in the other garages. Is it? Do you know? But anyway, so I think it already is a good deal for people, and we want it to be.
I just wanted to make one comment. The reason why this is before us and the timing of it, it's not being pushed on us by the library because they no longer want to do the validations. We're considering this now for an exciting reason, and that's because the technology at the library is going to be upgraded. And one thing I think everybody can agree on is that those machines are too often broken, and the fence, you get trapped behind it, and your ticket doesn't work. So all of that is going to be replaced in mid-September.
Yeah, I think you accidentally said library, but you meant the garage.
The garage. The library's perfect, but the machines at the garage don't work. Thank you. So that is what's motivating this discussion now.
Right, and actually just to augment that statement, it's not just that those machines were old, they were failing, and we are moving with uncharacteristic speed because of it. So we have to make some decisions, and we thought that was a reasonable trade-off. I do have one question, though, that both related to the gentleman's comments and also Council President Miller's, which is, for somebody who gets 2 hours validation at the library, what is the cost they pay for the third hour if they stay for 3 hours now?
Currently, yeah.
Right, I know it is under the ordinance, I want to know what it is now.
Hourly charge.
Well, I'm asking, staff should know this, so I'm
I think I know where you're going, though. There's a small segment for whom this will be more expensive than it is currently.
Right, I think our intent was, you'd pay for an hour between 1 and 2 hours, but that people wouldn't end up paying an increase beyond that. And if that's what's happening, I think we want to figure out if there needs to be an adjustment. Look, maybe what we do is we go with this because we have to get the equipment in. And then as we review the parking rates, which we're planning to do in short order anyway, we take that up. Right. We don't really have time to adjust this further and get the project done by mid-September, right?
Correct.
Right, and that's not what happens under the ordinance. Under the ordinance, they would be paying for 3 hours. So I think we're going to have to make some adjustments in line both with this gentleman's comments and with Council President Miller's. I think we should go ahead and, my suggestion is we go ahead and approve this because otherwise we can't get the project done, and we need to. The equipment's simply failing. But then we accelerate our review of the garage parking rates.
I have another question, too. If there's concerns about the rates and interest in tweaking them, and I'm not sure if I hear consensus on that or not, but let's say there is consensus on wanting to tweak the rates in here, could we introduce essentially a parallel ordinance at the next meeting with rates people are comfortable with and have the public hearing for the same night, and just as a way to keep it moving, because I know we want to have it passed, but it seems like you're just to have the garage opened and then to change the rates, and then I know we're going to be doing a review of all the parking meters and the garage rates, and to change them again, it's like a bad idea. And we do have a meeting in between when the public hearing for this would be scheduled.
I think what would be cleaner is if you delayed introducing this until the 24th, rather than introduce this one now and then introduce the second one on the 24th and then have public hearings on both on the 15th. I would suggest maybe just hold off on introducing this one, see about tweaking, addressing some of the comments that were made, and then just introducing an ordinance on the 24th.
Okay. And I do want to survey council, because I'm not sure if I've heard a clear consensus from everybody.
Could I ask a question that might pertain to this, which is from staff? When do you, practically speaking, need to know the rate in order for the project to complete in mid-September as planned? If we want to go in with whatever the rate is, for a steady stream of at least a few months or whatever.
To be honest, we could keep the same rates that you have now.
That's not my question. My question is, when do you need to know the rates you're going to use on day one? Do you need to know them the day before, 2 weeks before, a month before?
Unfortunately, we probably can give you a better answer after Wednesday. We have a conference call with Precision at 9:30 Wednesday. We met today with staff because there's some issues related to wiring and the cables and different things.
Which you told us there would be, yes.
We met this afternoon at 2 o'clock at the garage with staff and our electrician, as well as then IT, to discuss that. We now are meeting we have a conference call at 9:30 Wednesday morning with Precision to discuss the installation and everything that they need, as well as where they are meeting the September 14th delivery deadline, or delivery right now that they have to come in and start installing everything. So my guess, based on what they've talked to us before, is they probably are looking to have it a week or so ahead of time in order to program it in, maybe even the same day, because one of the beauties of the new system is we got the ability to change the rates, sitting at the desk. You decide you want to change the rate tonight at 9 o'clock, and by 9:30 I can have with the new system, 30 minutes later, I can start charging a new rate. So that's what we're looking at.
If everything stays precisely on schedule, when is the installation period?
The 14th to 18th is the installation period.
And our next meeting is what, the 15th? I'm sorry, our first September meeting is the 15th?
Yes. So they could test the equipment with the existing rates, and as they're doing the actual installation, we can update them after the council meeting.
I see. Well, okay, so I guess we do need to have this conversation then.
I mean,
One thing I think is important, either way, you're going to end up at the 15th is going to be the date that you'll have the public hearing for this. And that's probably, not optimal, but it's probably timing necessary that they could use to actually make this. So you can do it on the 15th. It may not be optimal, but I believe we can make the changes to the system by that time. So I don't think it should be a big issue.
I guess I would be in favor of moving ahead, getting the equipment installed. We all realize that the equipment we have there is no longer supported. We can't get replacement parts for it, and we need desperately to get the new equipment in. And I would support going ahead with the ordinance, with the rates as indicated, and examining what happens after we do that. And if necessary, come back, review it, and adjust the rates accordingly.
That's exactly what I was going to
Okay, it sounds like there's consensus there.
I agree, Bernie.
I agree.
Get ourselves, 4 or 5 months worth of data to see how the garage is going to be used, how it's going to be used with a system that actually works, making sure we're collecting all the revenue and everything is calculated correctly, and then looking at those rates and looking as you expand out from the garage to the surrounding streets, meters, and how the whole scheme works. That is the ultimate goal of, the garage, the meter, the on-street parking, and everything else, to come up with what's a fair rate structure.
Okay, I think I see a lot of nods from council then. Is there a motion to introduce them?
Did we close public session?
Oh, well, it wasn't a public hearing.
Can I just make one more comment? I did check online, the Palmer Square rates for parking are 2 hours is $5.
We're bargain. I make a motion that we accept that we introduce the ordinance as read.
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Butler. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Mr.
Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and the public hearing for this ordinance is scheduled for September 15th, 2015.
Can I just ask a process question? If we want to change the rates at that meeting, that's considered a substantive change, or is that something you could pass the ordinance?
No, that would be a substantial change that would require reintroduction.
Just wanted to know that ahead of time, rather than find that out the day of.
Okay. An ordinance by Princeton, next ordinance introduction is an ordinance by Princeton concerning designated bus stop locations on Witherspoon Street and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And Ms. Stockton.
I think I'll just stand up here for the next two. This ordinance came from New Jersey Transit and Avalon Bay Communities in the process of looking at the development of the Avalon Bay site. New Jersey Transit reviewed the bus stops along Witherspoon Street, and there was a recommendation to make some changes, to consolidate some stops, and to delete some stops. The former borough had ordinanced their bus stops. The former township, I think, had designated bus stops by resolution. So this is the first of two steps. The first step is just to satisfy the request for Witherspoon Street, but we will be coming back to you in the future to designate all of the former borough stops as part of this section in the ordinance. So what we're looking at doing is establishing a bus stop that would be in front of the Avalon Bay Communities on the north side of Franklin Avenue. Currently, the stop, if you're going northbound, is on the south side of Franklin. So this ordinance, if passed, would go to the New Jersey Transportation Commissioner for approval, and then we ask that they would work with us to actually establish the stop once a certificate of occupancy is issued for Avalon Bay. We don't want to invite bus stops and other transportation activities in front of an active construction site where they will also be doing improvements to curb and sidewalk and landscaping in that area.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Or is there a motion to introduce?
Second.
It's moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Crumlow. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
I do have a quick question, though. Bob Kaiser, maybe you can answer this question, or Jenny. Will this just be a standard New Jersey issue bus stop? I know we've been talking about getting different bus stops in certain locations, so which will this be?
This will be a standard bus stop, but we're having discussions with Avalon Bay regarding the type of shelter, and we'll be bringing forward to council after TNT has their meeting in September with recommendations regarding shelters, and we're hoping that Avalon Bay will agree to install a special type shelter at this location as well.
Will it be the New Jersey Transit issued shelter, or are we going with something different?
There's two different options we're looking at. One is a New Jersey Transit shelter, different than what we have installed in the community so far. And then secondly, there's a shelter that we're looking at that is not their shelter. So we're going to have further discussions with Avalon Bay and then bring forth a recommendation.
And by further discussions, you would be meaning that maybe Avalon Bay would pick up the cost of that shelter? Because is it still true that New Jersey Transit, if you don't use their shelter, they won't give you the money for, they won't reimburse you for not using their shelter?
That's correct, yes.
And there were a number of spots around town where we were going to have shelters, and we haven't, it doesn't look like we've made a lot of progress.
We've made some excellent progress. The subcommittee's made some good progress, and those recommendations are going to be coming before Transportation Traffic Committee at the September meeting. It's very exciting what the recommendations will be.
Okay.
We also will be adding in some concrete pads, right, Bob, as part of our concrete project, our sidewalk project for
Not at this location. Avalon Bay will be providing the concrete, but as part of the award, the concrete contractor will be installing concrete at other locations in town to provide for some of these new shelters.
Okay. The ordinance has been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on August 24th, 2015. And the next is an ordinance by Princeton regulating parking along Riverside Drive West in the vicinity of Prospect Avenue and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And I'll ask Ms. Stockton again to explain this ordinance.
The request for this ordinance came from our police department, who had been working with Riverside School in regards to safety of transportation movements in that area. And it was requested that the parking spaces between Prospect Avenue and the driveway into Riverside School be eliminated to increase sight distance at the intersection. We've got a crossing guard and a very active intersection of Prospect and Riverside. So that's what we're bringing to you today. It's actually would establish a no stopping or standing zone in that area that would then discourage parents using it also as a de facto drop-off area, and thereby maintaining the safety that we're seeking by taking away that extra parking.
Fabulous, as a Riverside parent. It's a great move.
Are there any other questions or comments from council, or is there a motion to introduce?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Howard and seconded by Ms. Crum-Miller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
And Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the ordinance is introduced unanimously. The public hearing will be on August 24th, 2015. Next, we come to an ordinance by Princeton authorizing the amendment of certain easements and the conveyance of other easements to the United States Postal Service in connection with the Palmer Square Post Office building. And I'd like to ask our attorney, Ms. Cecil, to walk us through some of the highlights of this ordinance.
So as you know, the post office in Palmer Square sits on land that the post office owns and acquired many, many years ago from a predecessor corporation that the borough then became a successor to. The building occupies the entire footprint of the land that the post office owns, and there are certain appurtenances or features that are actually physically part of the building that spill over onto borough-owned land. These consist of things like window wells, stairwells, actually a couple of the entrance steps into the building. And many, many years ago, there were easements conveyed to the post office to address a number of these features, but all of those easements provide that if the post office sells the property, the easements by their own terms will automatically expire. Beyond that, there are some other features of the building for which there are no easements, namely the handicap access ramp that currently goes into the entrance, I think the bottom entrance step. And then one of the existing window wells, the easement actually doesn't straddle the entirety of the window well. It sort of covers half of the window well. So the post office is selling the property. They've come to the town for two things. One is to have the expiring the easements that would expire normally upon the sale of the property. They'd like to have those just continue in effect. And then they'd like easements to cover these additional features of the building for which there currently are no easements. And the whole reason being that they're trying to sell the building itself and have that building be reused and they need the easements to cover all of these different features of the building in order to accomplish that. So under local lands and buildings law, the municipality, any sale of property has to be authorized by ordinance. When the town is selling to another governmental entity, such as the federal government, which would be the case here, you can sell at a privately negotiated price as opposed to having to put it out for bid. And the post office is, in fact, paying $10,000 for these easements. And that was, in essence, to try to at least cover some of the legal fees on my end that the town has incurred in negotiating the agreement and working through all the documents. I just want to add, there's a survey that shows all the easements that's attached to the ordinance. I recognize it's probably very difficult to read because I had to shrink it down so far. But for anyone in the public or council members who want to see it, there are 2 full-size surveys that I've given to the clerk, plus 11 by 17 copies that'll be more legible than what's physically attached to the ordinance online.
Thank you. Ms. Cromwell?
Well, just a question. So when you've been negotiating, you haven't been negotiating with the federal government. You've been negotiating with a potential owner. Is that correct?
Negotiating with the attorney who represents the potential owner, but I think has also in this instance been acting as the spokesperson for the post office. It's kind of been concurrent.
So who is the client of the lawyer that, I mean,
my understanding
the lawyer was representing the owner, right? So, I mean, the potential owner.
The potential, well, I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely, he's representing the potential owner. I don't know what his arrangement is with the post office, if he's also been serving as their representative and putting together these documents. I don't know that he has, I don't know that he hasn't. But my understanding is that the company that the post office is under contract with is a company out of California called Elcor. That's who's identified on the survey that was provided to me.
Can you spell that, or?
L-C-O-R. I think it's all caps.
But from my understanding, the owner did not want to identify him or herself, because we said, who is it? What's the person's name? Who owns this company, or who is it? And we couldn't find out. Is that correct?
I'll be honest, I haven't really delved into all of that. I was more concerned with the legal documentation. I do think that it's fair to say that the post office would need this regardless of who it's selling to. So, in some ways, I don't want to say it's immaterial who they're selling to, but I think that these features go with the building. So whether it's to Elcor, whether it's to somebody else, the features go with the building, and so easements would be needed regardless.
Right, and everyone has heard this before, but I think that we are doing a disservice to the residents by just not providing any resistance to this and just practically giving away those easements for $10,000. There's nothing forcing us to give away the easements right now. The only thing is the threat, from what I understand, is, the federal government would impose eminent domain on us if we resist this sale. And I'm not even so sure it doesn't sound exactly right that the federal government could impose eminent domain to allow access to a building that's a pottery barn. I don't know how that's in the public interest when we have a public building that we're turning into a private building. So I'm really urge my colleagues to vote against this and put up some resistance. It's going to be a terrible loss if we have to lose the post office. And I think when I saw these easements, I didn't think, this is just some little thing. I thought, there's our leverage. We didn't know about it before. But now that we know about it, it's our leverage to keep the post office. And I've heard from so many people who are just mourning the loss of the post office. It's going to change our public square it's probably going to be high-end retail. That's what goes in Palmer Square. Instead of having, a pedestrian post office that we can all walk to and that's right in the center of town and it's a big public building, we're going to have, who knows what, an expensive store. Nobody wants that. I know a single person in the town who wants that. So I would ask that we say no. Let's just not provide the easements.
I just wanted to clarify one point. just to be fair, the post office has not threatened to condemn the easements. I've given the advice when I've met with you and discussed
Right,
this
that's
with
what I
you, that
mean,
in
but
the
that's the-
absence of this, in my opinion, it being the federal government, they would have the ability to condemn the easements instead of just acquiring them from us. But I just wanted to be
I- no,
clear,
right.
since this is a public meeting, I don't want there to be a misunderstanding that the post office has made threats. They haven't.
Right. But so that's really the only thing that's keeping, I mean, the only reason, if, maybe everybody else wants a Pottery Barn there, but somehow I don't think so. But if we want to try to save our post office, then why don't we just not sell these easements?
Ms. Howard? So, thank you, Councilwoman Crumiller. You've been a consistent voice on this point, and I think you raise an important point. I, too, mourn the loss of the post office. It's such a, it's amazing having it there, but my concern is that the reality is, when you look across the country, post offices are closing everywhere because it's obviously a losing business. And so, I don't hold out hope that we could sweep back the ocean, unfortunately, with the boom here, given the trends with the post office. And I just want to follow up on Trishka on your comment that, from my perspective, I think as I've understood the discussion we've been having and as I've understood the legal advice you've given us, the concern is that the post office didn't even understand these were easements, and now that they're trying to convey the building, they need these easements to be able to do so, and there is a real risk that the building could be condemned because otherwise they can't sell the building, and they need to. They need to get out of maintaining the building. Their costs are too high there. This is what's happening around the country, where unfortunately all the beautiful old post offices, many of them are being closed. And so your legal advice to us was that there is the risk they could condemn it, and so we're in a position where, in order to maintain at least the beautiful building and make sure that we maintain the building, the way to do so is to negotiate, and I want to thank you at least for negotiating some compensation on behalf of us giving those, but that really that is the pickle we're in.
That's certainly the way I see it.
And does the 10,000...
Hold on, I just want to hear from other councilors.
Yeah.
Mr. Lerman?
I'm in favor. Unfortunately, the post office will be moving. I don't think that, I'm like Jenny, I love the post office there. It's been all my life. I love the post office at that spot. I love it. But the reality, there's 2 employees, there's 11,000 square feet. It just it doesn't make any sense for them to stay, unfortunately, in that large spot. I would love for them to, but they won't. And I think to try to prohibit the post office from selling that building, which is what we're sort of kind of doing here in a roundabout way, isn't really fair. I understand Councilwoman Crumiller's feeling about that we have leverage in regard to trying to sell to the highest bidder, but I don't think that's exactly where I would like to go. If the post office is okay with the sale of the building, and if they need the easements that they discussed, and they've paid us our legal fees, and we're not in it for any dollar amount here, I don't see any reasons why we shouldn't move forward. So I'm in favor.
Ms. Crumiller?
Well, I don't think they are paying our legal fees, are they?
Yeah, the 10,000 should cover them.
That will cover it?
That's what that is, yes.
Based on my estimates, that should be sufficient to cover them, yep.
Are there any other questions or comments? And I know probably we have a member of the public who'd like to speak too.
Yeah, just very briefly, I am in favor of the proposed ordinance. Just to correct the record, we are not trying to block the post office from selling. There was a sort of a slip of the tongue, I think, by one of my colleagues. I just want to be clear. We are not trying to prevent the post office from selling that building.
Well, I would.
Well, I know you would, but one of our colleagues said that in a little bit of a different way, and just to be very, no, it wasn't. It's Councilman Liverman, not
Councilman Liverman.
And just to clear the record, we're not trying to do that, and I disagree with that frankly we should. If there's a problem with the zoning, if there's a problem with a use of that building that we're not happy with, we should correct the zoning. But otherwise, I think the government is on very thin ice to be going along the direction of trying to prevent the sale of the building, and I'm not at all in favor of it.
Can we hear from the public, and then we'll bring it back to council? Sorry, Mr.
Go ahead, let
right.
Mr. Newton talk.
Mr. Newton.
I'm slightly bothered I didn't know what the 2-hour rate was at Palmer Square garages, so you know, I'm kind of still smarting from it a bit. I could have gone into the internet as well. Very quickly, I'm really here in unofficial capacity. I do want to say, Ms. Crimilla, you know, we're actually on, and I'm talking as a resident more than my official capacity in Palmer Square. At 92 Nassau Street, which is a building which my family has an interest in, which is the Lower Pine building, I did have recent experience in selling a couple of... Sorry, I had recent experience in selling a couple of easements, and I do think $10,000 seems to be a little for the value of which, and you know, this was me buying the post office. You know, I'd be accused of probably gross hypocrisy, but you know, I had two small easements which I achieved, I think, in excess of $30,000 for, and so I do think that there's some precedent for what you were saying regarding the $10,000, but it really wasn't my main point. There's also an easement, I believe, and I was kind of interested in what happens to this particular one, where back in the 1930s, and this was obviously when we were doing our research, of the easement onto the green at Palmer Square. And obviously, what I read was that that particular easement was granted by, I think it was called the Princeton Municipal Redevelopment Organization, or some sinister sounding name, specifically for the use of a post office. And I'm kind of interested as to what, whereas I depart from you a little bit because I'm excited about getting something going there, assuming the post office is going to be sold. I am interested particularly as to the easement, which I know runs very specifically with the post office for the entrance onto the green. And I'm very interested as to what specifically is going to happen concerning that. And I don't know whether that particular easement is being addressed this evening. With that, I think you and I at some stage should have a discussion about retail stores for Palmer Square, okay? But thank you very much. And I believe there's another public hearing on this on August the 24th, is that correct? It says...
I thought...
It says in the agenda...
You were going to make it in September, so September 15th?
I think that's I think that may be a typo on the agenda. My understanding was that the public hearing would be on September 15th.
That's correct. We wanted to try to have the issues that we thought that there might be an interest from the public in participating in, and certainly this is one of them in September, not August, so it would be the first meeting in September, which is September 15th.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And could you clarify about the easement that goes on to the green?
I'm not 100% sure which specific, there's so many tiny easements involved in this. What I would suggest is the survey shows absolutely everything, and the ordinance itself is very specific, as to which easements are the ones that are expiring and being continued as opposed to the new ones. But if you look on the survey itself, and as I said, I've given the clerk, full-size copies, that shows all of the existing easements plus the new easements. And, if after looking at that, if you've got specific questions, I'd be happy to take a look at it with you. Yeah, that'd be fine with me.
Ms. Connolly?
Well, since I feel that I'm probably outvoted, I do think that we should also, we did negotiate for them to give us the $10,000 for the easements. So what else? I mean, one thing that we could do, and I think we did discuss this, but I don't know if it was in the agreement, that we should insist that the use is a public use. In other words, it's not a private club, because I think some things like that are legal under zoning, but since it's a public square, I think that the use should be public. And we should put that into the agreement. Because otherwise, it could end up being a private, some kind of private use that doesn't allow all members of the public in. And especially since it's a historic building with that mural.
Well, if it's, the zoning is for restaurant and retail, so is there a way to interpret that, to create something that's private?
Well, I mean, somebody could always come in for a variance. So, there's no, zoning can change in the future, someone could always come in for a variance to conceivably turn it into, purely private. Yeah, I've got to think about how that would be worded in the agreement, because I guess you could argue even a private club is, they're still, depending on their membership qualifications and all the rest, it's open to the public. So I'd have to figure out how to word that in the agreement. I mean, if there's general interest on the part of council, then what I would say is don't introduce this ordinance tonight. Let me go back to the Postal Service and to Elcor with some further changes to the agreement.
To me, it seems like at the very least, be a public building on a public square.
Do you want to get a reaction from the rest of council for that suggestion? Yep, Ms. Butler?
I actually had a slightly different question that I was wondering.
Well, before we go to that, I just want to get closure on this.
Yes, I would agree with the suggestion that Jenny made. I'd be very much against having the building turned into a private club or, for example, a religious facility of some kind. So I think that it has to be something that is open to the public like the rest of Palmer Square is open to the public. I think it would be very wrong to have one part of the square be a facility with limited access only to members, whatever you define the member as.
Right.
Well, I was just assuming, I mean, I'm glad that Councilwoman Cormier brought this up, but I was assuming that the whole idea was to have this to be a public place. I was thinking the old retail establishment that Dave Newton and everyone else mentioned earlier. I did not see this as a public, as a private club, but I mean, if we can put that in there, it's fine with me.
Okay. Tricia, is there any reason we couldn't?
It's solely a point of negotiation, so I'm happy to go back with them. I would suggest holding off on introducing this ordinance then, because
Okay.
That's a change to the agreement, and mostly because I have to work out the language. I'm less concerned with you introducing an ordinance that has a change to an agreement that the other side might not agree to. That's their problem. But it's more a question of figuring out the language, and it's not something I want to try to do on the fly sitting
Fair
here.
enough. Yeah. Ms. Butler, did you have another concern?
I did. It's on Section 5A, the historic preservation. The post office has, do I have this correct? They've already entered into an agreement with the New Jersey Historic Trust regarding the historic features of this building.
I don't know if they have signed it, or if it is that it's part of the deal with the sale, that easement, I think it is an easement with the Historic Trust. So I can't sit here and say to you right now it's already been signed, or if it's something that's being done as part of the deal. There's a commitment
Right,
to
I
do it.
understand. So we won't know what that is until the sale has been completed, or?
I think the answer to that is yes. You won't know. That's another point I can go back and get clarification on.
That would be great, because we had some discussion in historic preservation then today about whether our local historic preservation would still have jurisdiction over the exterior of the building. I think that there was some discussion that the New Jersey Historic Trust was trying to get an agreement, even though they wouldn't typically have jurisdiction over the inside of the building, to save the WPA mural and some other features. So I would like clarification on that, what will happen, if you can. and whether you think this granting of the easements in any way impacts our ability to preserve the historic nature of the building.
Okay, and it sounds like the recommendation from council is to not act tonight, and we'll carry this over and put it on the agenda for the meeting of August 24th.
Okay.
To introduce it.
To introduce it, so we don't need to vote or
Fine.
to table or anything because we introduced it, right?
But we would still aim to
On the
have the
15th.
public,
Public hearing is September 15th. Yes, we keep the schedule the same. And I know we're not going to have a full contingent on August 24th, so for those council members, I think there's a couple who aren't going to be here to make sure to read the agreement, and if you have any concerns before then, share them either with myself or with Trishka or your colleagues. Okay.
I'd also like to ask who the company is. I mean,
It's in the material. They're mentioned in the easement agreement, I believe.
Look them up on the internet.
what kind of, I did, I couldn't, did you look it up?
Yeah, they're, yeah. Yeah, elcor.com, or, yep. I mean, I don't know, Trishka, can we use this as leverage to ask about what their plans are?
My sense is that this deal hasn't closed yet, and so they're reluctant to make their presentation before.
Well, we're reluctant to give them the easement.
I
mean,
understand
you know,
that.
fair.
No, I know.
It's negotiation.
Again, if you want to, if you, up until now, we haven't pressed them on showing us their plans. I think part of the reluctance is that once you unveil some plans publicly, even if they're tentative, even if they're conceptual, and then changes get made along the way, people tend to latch on to the first thing they see. So I think that's been part of the reluctance. Beyond that, I can't speak for them. I have no interest in speaking for them, quite frankly. If you do really want to see even just some conceptual plans before you make a decision on the easements, I'll take that back.
We would like that, right, Jenny? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
And I assume by that you
Definitely.
mean see them publicly, not have stuff emailed to you to review privately?
I mean, they should understand what kind of place they're buying and what kind of town we are.
I think we're beginning to figure that out.
They could send it to us privately, but it will still end up in the public domain. So however they choose to do it is fine with me.
Okay. Next is an ordinance of the mayor and council of Princeton concerning salaries and compensation of certain personnel of the municipality of Princeton. And either Ms. Monzo or Mr. DeShield, did you want to explain?
The amendment you have before you tonight for the salary ordinance does two things, really. One is to make some adjustments to the actual titles within the salary range for a number of titles, including fixing the assistant superintendent of public works and actually changing that to the director to be consistent with the current title. It also, in 3 locations where we have the environmental health specialists, it adjusts their range to allow for us to provide them with the agreed upon salary increment for this year, which is 1.5%. And again, another adjustment on the corner house, just clarifying that to make it the corner house office coordinator.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from council on this ordinance? Or is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
And moved by Mr. Miller. Is there a
Second.
second? And seconded by Mr. Simon. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crumiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on August 24th, 2015. Next, we come to our resolutions. The first resolution, 15-230, resolution on COA reform package, and these come as recommendations from the Affordable Housing Board. Is there any questions or comments, or is there a motion?
I have a comment, which is I'd like to request that we split this resolution into two parts and consider the second actionable part dealing with, looks like Bill 4534 separately, because I should recuse myself from voting on that, but not the rest of this.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, you had asked that earlier. So is there a motion to approve this resolution minus the section dealing with 4534?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Lieberman and seconded by Mr. Miller. Any comments from council? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we'll take up this section specifically on 4534. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Lieberman. Is there a second?
Well, go ahead.
Second.
If somebody wants to
Seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Discussion?
Well, at our last meeting, I believe that we, am I looking at the right one? We hired Burchell, did we not?
We did.
And so now we are going to have support a resolution. On what basis are we sort of going to support this resolution? I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense when we just hired him.
This came from the Housing Board. I don't know if there's...
I know, but I think that they came up with this before we had done that. I'm sorry?
Can you point to the inconsistency that you're talking about?
Oh.
Because I don't...
I think
I'm sorry, Jenny, I can't find it right now.
No, I believe you. I just can't see it.
Well,
the second issue, right? Is that the one where...
Councilwoman, you're referring to Assembly Bill number 4534.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Which would assign the Blaustein School to calculate statewide affordable housing need, and that's where Dr. Burchell works. The town has retained Dr. Burchell to provide, to help Princeton arrive at its own calculation. So I can certainly see candidly, yes, I agree, there's an inconsistency there. I don't know what the Housing Board's rationale was for wanting to oppose the statewide bill. I mean, they are a little bit different. It's not, one deals with legislation, I assume, to retain Dr. Burchell at the statewide level.
Well, how about if we just strike that one?
But that's the only one we're voting on now, because the...
Okay, can we just table it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I guess we can...
To table it?
Yeah, I think that we can table it. We have to also remember that this was done before we actually hired anyone.
Right.
So this was
That's
done...
what I thought.
Yeah, this was done way before, so...
Okay.
If you want to table this, I think that'd be fine for the affordable housing.
Okay, so is that a motion to table from Ms. Butler?
Yes.
And a second from
Second.
Mr. Lieberman? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Can I get clarification, please? Are we tabling the entire ordinance, or are we tabling just the second part?
No, it was the resolution. Everything passed except for that number 2.
For the part about 4534?
Right.
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes. We split it into 2 pieces. So
I
the first
understand.
part passed, the second part tabled.
I understand.
All right.
We need to get Patrick back.
Next resolution is reaffirmation for affordable housing, and I just wanted to clarify something with...
Mayor, I'd like to request that the council not take action on this. As you know, we are in litigation now concerning our affordable housing, and I would just prefer that the council not take action on this resolution at this time.
Okay.
Fine with that.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the next resolution, 15-232, resolution to amend the open space budget. And I'd like to turn to either, I don't know if Ms. Monzo or Mr. DeShield.
Back in April, you adopted the 2015 budget, and it included an open space budget plan in that budget document. And subsequent to that, you have indicated a desire to increase staffing for the recreation department as that the request came in, and you've had discussions about went through personnel committee. The recommendation that administration was talking about was to be able to finance these two positions out of the open space trusts, and it was discussed at personnel committee and recommended really that we fund a portion of it out of the open space trust for an estimate of the time that these two positions may be working predominantly on the open space areas and for maintenance of our open space and parks. So we took the increase of the two individuals, which amounts to of the salary and wage, not the benefits, and it amounts to about $90,000. That also includes a promotion or a change for one of the positions to become an assistant foreman for recreation maintenance. So we got a recommendation from Recreation to ask about what percentage would these positions be working on open space, and it was determined that about 65% of the time would be towards that, so we calculated 65% of the 90,000 additional cost, which came to the 58,500, and this is a resolution to transfer that amount from a reserve line item in your open space budget to the salary and wage line item so that we have those monies available in that budget for this additional appropriation. And you have the resolution there. We also gave you the backup of the original open space budget document page, and then as amended if you choose to do so tonight.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from council on this?
So moved.
It's moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Mr. Miller. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is, there's actually a series of resolutions that I encourage us to take in block. Is there one on?
Right, 233 through 237. And I'll move them in.
Yes, except I think we might need to pull out one. Is there one with Governor's? There's not a Governor's Lane here. Okay, perfect. So yeah, resolutions 233 through resolution 237. It's been moved by Mr. Simon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Krummeler.
Just
Any
for
discussion?
just for public consumption, this is a state formula for calculation. Is that correct, Mr. Kaiser? There's really not much here in terms of negotiation.
Yes, that's correct. This is required by the Municipal Services Act to reimburse these condo associations, and we compute the cost based on what it costs the municipality to plow snow, to pick up leaves, to pick up brush, or what we pay PSC&G per street light, or what we pay for a trash collection. So it's very straightforward, and we reimburse based on what it costs the municipality, not what it costs the homeowners association for these services.
I just had one question because I don't remember doing this before, but maybe we did. Have we done this every year?
Yes.
We have? Okay.
Are there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The block of resolutions passes unanimously. Next, we get to 15238, resolution of the mayor and council of the municipality of Princeton authorizing a professional services agreement in the not-to-exceed amount of $10,500 with community grants, planning and housing for the preparation of a community development block grant application. Are there any questions on this from councilors or a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Motion to pass. Mr. Lieberman moves the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Miller. Is there any further discussion? And if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next, we come to a series of vehicle purchases for the Department of Public Works. Is there any opposition to moving these in block?
I would like 15 through 39 from the block, please.
Okay. Why don't we start with that one, because that's first. So,
Yeah, let's
so
get an explanation.
15 to 39, resolution of the mayor and council of Princeton to award a contract in the not-to-exceed amount of $89,915 to Wolfington Body Company Incorporated for the purchase of a new 19-passenger lift-equipped diesel shuttle bus, and this is the new freebie, correct? Yes. The university had agreed in their voluntary agreement contribution to pay for the new vehicle.
Correct. Right. They had recommended also to look at, instead of purchasing the new vehicle, to look at a service somewhat similar to what First Transit provides with the Tiger Transit. And so we had put it out to bid both ways, and now the recommendation before you is to purchase a new vehicle that does not preclude us in a couple of years taking a look at our ridership, our costs, and possibly going out to bid again in the future for a service contract.
But go ahead, Mr.
I
Miller.
was under the impression that we were going to look at the possibility of integrating this service, which I believe this is the freebie service, integrating it with the university service so that there would be a coordinated schedule, coordinated location system, and it would be provided under contract. And it looks as if we're continuing the practice of buying bus vehicles and operating a bus service. And I'm wondering if this is really something that the municipality does well enough to make it cost-effective to do it that way rather than to bid it out.
I'm not a member of the Mass Transit Group. In the memorandum that we provided to you, we did provide the bid costs for having this as a service completely managed by an outside firm. And at this point, it is exceeding the cost of what it would be for us to own our own vehicle and have a contract for the maintenance and the driver.
But we did hope that the university's service would bid on ours, and I think that's what you were talking about, because that would have been the perfect, but they didn't even bid on it. They just had zero interest, unfortunately, because I think that would have been great.
Also, I'd just like to note that the agreement with the university provides for them paying up to $90,000 for this purchase, and coincidentally, the bid came in just under $90,000.
So how many vehicles will we own, how many bus vehicles will we own now after we purchase this?
We have 2 existing vehicles, and we will be retiring one with this purchase, so we would still be at 2 vehicles.
And one is essentially a reserve vehicle or a backup vehicle?
Correct. Or if there's, for some reason, a special event planned where we need the second bus, it's then available.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Mr. Lieberman and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so those 5 in favor and 1 opposed, and do you want to state your reason for your objection?
Yes, I really think that we need to pursue doing this differently. I don't think that it is really beneficial for the municipality to be operating a bus service. I don't think this is something that we are really expert at, and I think we ought to work in the direction of integrating this service with the university service and kind of piggybacking it on the university service and not be in the business of operating in effect, a small-time bus service.
I mean, just to reiterate, we agree with that, and we tried, but the university had no interest.
The university's provider had no interest. It wasn't that the university wasn't.
Well, I mean, I think that if the university had interest, maybe they could make it happen.
I don't know if that's true, because that's who
Right.
recommended
It's
going down that path.
And,
But anyways,
this really serves an underserved population, and, some of these people, the ridership is not great. Believe me, I've said this for years, that you wonder why we're doing this, but on the other hand, I think the people who do use it really need it. I think we need to continue to do things to improve ridership and to get people on the bus who, some of the kids, particularly, I think, after school, who could use this service the most, are the most reluctant to use it, but be that as it may, I think this is a service we need to continue.
Okay, next up on our resolutions, thank you for pulling that one, because that wasn't one of the Department of Public Works vehicles. The rest of the resolutions here, 15-240 through 15-250, are...
240 is line striping.
That was line striping.
I would just call them contracts and vehicles. I still would suggest moving them in block.
Okay.
They're not all vehicles.
Thank you.
They're not all vehicles, but they're all either contracts or vehicles.
Okay.
And I would encourage us to just move
Okay,
in block.
all right, so...
And I'll move them in block.
Okay, moved by Mr. Simon and seconded by Mr. Liverman. And is there any discussion or questions for Mr. Huff?
Well, I guess I have a question for Patrick, and that is, I assume since you're on Public Works, all of these you've looked at this in terms of the capital budget, and all of these
Yes,
vehicles were in here?
We asked that question of Mr. Huff and Ms. Manzo, and they said yes. Everything's already budgeted or has a reserve from a previous year's resolution that was passed, one or the other.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'd just like to comment that in the press meeting this afternoon, one member of the press asked if we were buying American vehicles, and in looking at this, these are all American vehicles, U.S.-made vehicles.
And just for the record, we don't have a Buy America policy. These are all under state contract, but sometimes America is number one, so we celebrate when that's the truth. All right.
But to Council President Miller's point, the U.S. government has started buying Hyundais, and they buy them because they're made in, they said, Alabama or Tennessee, and they have to be labeled that that's where they were made for them to purchase them. So it's weird now how, we think we're buying all American cars, but they could be, from another, country, but made here. Yeah, American plant. So that's a little weird, too.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. All right, next we come to our consent agenda, which contain items of a routine nature passed by a single vote.
Mayor?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if did we do 15-238? The professional service?
I have a vote on 15.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we did that.
We did.
That was, I motioned that.
Yeah. Mr. Liverman and Mr.
All right, so are there any items on the consent agenda that anyone on council would like removed? And
Two questions. I don't think it need to be removed, but I think the questions are very quick. So the first one is, we're appointing on one of these Christy Peacock as the Fair Housing Officer. Is she replacing somebody, or is this a new
Can you
position?
talk into your mic, because I can't hear you?
Sorry. that on one of these resolutions, we are appointing Christy Peacock as the Fair Housing Officer.
Yeah, 15257.
Are we replacing somebody in that, or is that a new position?
No, this is something that's required as part of the Small Cities Grant, and we had appointed her last year when we applied for a similar grant, so this is just simply a reappointment so that we can
Okay.
demonstrate we have somebody in that position.
Okay, and then the second is, we're applying for a grant of up to $400,000. Is that an outright grant, or are there any sort of strings and conditions that council should be aware of?
Yes, there are some strings attached. It's a total of $400,000 that we would receive if we're successful. We're required to match that with $100,000 or 25%. That could be in the form of cash or services such as engineering, design, engineering, inspection.
And while we're talking about it, I wanted to put in a plug for something that Deanna Stockton's working on, which is outreach to the community for this grant. And what we're going to be applying for is money to install curb cuts and to do sidewalk repairs, specifically intended to help people who are in wheelchairs or who otherwise have difficulty navigating sidewalks. So if you know of people in the community or people are listening on television, we definitely want to connect and get those intersections that are really causing, or those curbs that are really causing issues for people. So there's going to be postcards where people can fill out information, and there'll be some sort of online form, and there'll be more information about that. But the more participation we get, the stronger our grant can be.
I'd also like to mention that the mayor was involved in a meeting with the Department of Community Affairs, and the Department of Community Affairs staff actually recommended that we apply for this type of a grant, and there's very much a large need here in the community to replace these handicap curb ramps because of the current standards have changed such that the very, very specific requirements that a good percentage of our curb ramps don't meet current requirements.
Oh, I was going to ask, so there are many downtown that dump people on an angle, not onto the crosswalk. Would those be crosswalks that ramps that you'd be considering? Do you know which ones I mean? You're like all around Palmer Square, they go at an angle and they're really not into either crosswalk. Would they be eligible
Correct.
for replacement?
Yes. But as I say, many of the ramps don't meet the current requirements. Some do, but many do not.
Okay. Terrific. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Ms. Crummiller and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. Is there a reason for us to go into closed session, or we'll wait till the next meeting? Okay, then is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Can't believe it. That's great, isn't it?